Hello and welcome back to the Little Craft House. Today I thought we would do a little bit of a watch me make session. So I'm going to make a slab today, a polymer clay slab, which would normally be cut into earrings, but today I actually want to just do this one as a bit of an example. Occasionally I will do up some example slabs. I bake them up as is, and then I just have them for reference later as ideas of things I can do when I'm looking for a bit of inspiration and just kind of stuck for ideas. So I'll show you all of my little tiles another day that I've done previously. But yeah, today we're going to try and use a few different techniques. You may have done these before or they may be new to you. But either way, this little slab that we're going to do today is going to be perfect for beginners, but also if you're a more experienced maker, you may like to do it and maybe add a little bit of a twist to it as well. So let's get started. I've got my base clay here of a white granite. I've actually mixed this one up myself. I like mixing a combination of white and grey granite, so both of those being primo. This corally colour that I'm using is just a mixture of scrap clay that I had just sitting on my desk. I'm also using Primo Apricot. I'm using Primo Orange. I'm using Souffle Fiji and also Souffle Sea Glass. How's that for memory? Once they're out the packets, it can sometimes be a bit hard to remember. So then I'm going to start chopping each of these colours into just some small little random pieces. Don't worry about them being the same size or symmetrical as long as they are close enough. You guys know me by now and know that perfection is not one of the things that I like. I like things being random and just as they come. So don't worry about or don't stress about things being perfect. We just need them to be in little pieces. From there, I'm just going to now give each piece a little condition by just rolling it in my fingers and on the palm of my hand, and then into little balls to just squish onto the clay. Once again, I'm just going to randomly place these down. As long as you don't push the clay down too hard, they will be able to be moved later if I decide that I'm not quite happy with that positioning. Okay, so rewatching this back over, that little bit of colour transfer on that top bit of orange is annoying me, but don't worry, I do fix that in just a second. Now, the great thing about this slab is that you don't have to have colours straight out of the packet. You can just use any scraps that you've got lying around. You'll notice in a lot of the tutorials I always pop things to the side and I say I'll find a use for them later. So this could possibly be one of those things that you use later. So just by finding colours that match together, I was wanting to go with a bit more of a tropical theme for this one, which is why I chose the colours that I did. But yeah, obviously choose whichever colours you like. All right, and so I'm happy with how these are all positioned now. So I'm just using the roller to squish them all down. And I want these to be pretty flat with that base. So I'm just going to go from different angles, just applying different amounts of pressure so that I don't elongate those circles, but rather just have them all pressed down evenly onto the base. Now our next step, I've grabbed a bit of copper clay and I'm just, is it copper or is it bronze? I can't quite remember. It's bronze because it's got a bit more of a reddy look to it. So I've just conditioned that up and I have popped it into my extruder to extrude out some really skinny little strands. If you don't have an extruder, that is no issue at all. Just condition it by your hands and just roll out your pieces thin. Again, they don't have to be perfect because you'll see in a second as I use this, they tend to stretch and distort a little bit anyway because this clay was a little bit soft. So the next technique that we're going to do, I haven't done before in a tutorial. So what I've done is got a shape cutter here. This one was one that I have from a long time ago, so we no longer stock this one. However, I'm what I'm doing is I'm popping an indent into the clay. So I didn't cut the clay, I just popped it on rather enough and just applied enough pressure that it's left that shape imprint on the clay. And then I'm just going to really carefully and slowly drape this strand around the shape. So I'm using one of my little pokey tools, pointer tools, texture tool, that's the word I'm looking for. One of my texture tools, it's got a little ball tip on the end of it, and I'm just using this to assist me in getting to those corner pieces. I'm also just applying a little bit of pressure just to keep it in position and just so it makes it easier to move that strand around. So technically, I suppose we're just outlining that shape. Now, if you were really clever, you could possibly do this freehand. I don't have the skill for that. Mine just never work out the way I want them to. So that's why I'm using the shape cutter as a guide, because this way I can get that shape that I want, and it is more precise than if I was just to drape it freehand. Now, I must have had a little bit of white clay left in my extruder or something, because there's a bit of colour transfer on the end of this strand, but it's as I'm coming down to the base, so it's not going to be an issue, because if I was to cut some shapes out, I probably wouldn't be going right to the edge anyway, but it looks like I was able to mostly get away with that. And then once I'm happy with that positioning, I'm now just applying a little bit of pressure with my finger just to push it down and make sure that it's not going to go anywhere. And so one of the great things about polymer clay is that you can attach raw clay to raw clay, and when it bakes, it will bond together. You don't have to add any adhesives or anything. You could if you want to, but I don't think it's necessary, especially not when you're pushing it down to create that tight bond. So I'm just going to do a couple more of those leafy shapes, just doing it exactly the same way that I did the first one. The only thing is that obviously once you've put that indent in, you have now marked the clay, so you can't change that positioning later. So do think about where that's going first before you go and pop those shapes into position. Okay, so now I figured that it needed still something a little bit extra, so I'm making some little loops to go on. Now these were being super fiddly and just not doing what I wanted them to do. Especially this one, it was just being really painful. You can see I already had one, it's behind my fingers at the moment, already had one on there that I was happy with. I want these loops to not be those perfect loops. I don't want them to be sort of like more elongated and just a little bit random. So that's kind of the theme today. So anyway, yep, I'm just getting really frustrated with these loops, and I think I stopped filming in a second so that I can get them done off camera, because it was just not working the way I wanted them to. I probably should have just made them a little bit bigger. That might have been easier. Right, there we go, the magic of editing. I've got some loops already made, and I'm just going to pop them on into position. See how simple that was? Next up, I'm going to add some detail with my Posca paint pen. So I'm just giving it a really good shake to get that paint flowing, and then I'm just going to add some little dots onto the clay. So I really like using Poscas, and you will see me use them quite often in my tutorials. I think if you scroll way back, you'll get a full tutorial on how to use the Poscas, but I'll just give a quick little overview. So because it is a paint, you can apply it either before or after baking. Now I like to use it before in this case because I'm just doing little dots. If I was doing a full shape, it may create drag on the raw clay, so therefore I would do it after baking. But because they're just these little simple dots, before is fine, and it doesn't bother me if it does put little indents in, because it'll just actually give it a bit more texture. So to make the paint permanent, you do need to bake it Anyway, so by doing it beforehand, I only have to bake my clay once. If I was to put it on once I had already baked or cut out and baked my pieces, then added the Posca, I would need to just rebake for probably 15 to 20 minutes just to set that paint so that it's more permanent. So I'm kind of a little lazy and I do like to do it before. Currently I'm just using that dotting tool that I had before, and I'm just popping little dots in to once again give it some texture in those other colours that are there. Okay, and so the last addition that I'm going to do to this slab, I'm going to use my little scalpel knife to put some little scratches into that coral colour. So just once again, a different type of texture just to add a little bit more interest to this slab. And as I mentioned before, I'm not going to be cutting this up and using it for earrings, as this is just going to be one of my example slabs that I have. So I'm going to bake this up and pop it to the side. And later on, when I'm feeling a little bit uninspired, I've got this to look back at and reference those different techniques that I used. But if you do want to see the process of making earrings, including like your sanding and sealing and those sorts of things, go back onto my channel and have a look through my previous tutorials, because I do have a bunch on there that go through each of those steps. So a big thank you for joining me today. I hope that this little slab has inspired you guys with some different techniques and ideas for creating your own polymer clay slabs. Thanks guys, and I shall see you again next time. Bye!